There we go. So session 3, the power of meaning in our lives. And a lot of these sessions, there is a degree of overlap as the themes are so broad. But I wanted to start off the first slide with something I said last week, and I just wanted to make sure I had facts correct, that it is Russia. If you have 10 kids, you get $6,000. In fact, if you look at the last bullet point, the kids have to be alive. Wait a minute. Where's that? The second one. Raising all children with an appropriate level of care and all being alive, except when they're killed in military service. That's a weird. It's almost like raising kids for the army.
One time, 1,600.
Yeah, I'm assuming that's one time, not. Yeah. And so I dedicate this slide to my sister Pam, who yesterday or last week I said, you should join and do the 5K. Let's run the 5K. And she looked at me with that look that she has. And then I said, I'll buy you lunch. And her immediate response was, that's like giving me $16,000 for 10 kids. And then I thought about her with 10 kids and then, that's not going to work. Anyway, that is one motivation on that end. And so I only have 2 points today. And then I have a special guest who's going to share something from their life. So just 2 points. And nothing profound, but hopefully significant. Meaning as the power of reframing the way we see our lives. The things that we do in our lives, when it's done with a sense of purpose, even though you're doing the same thing, it's not the same. It's not the same. So I want to start off with Albert Camus, and some of you may have heard of Albert Camus. He's an existential philosopher, French, born in, I think, Algeria, whose father died when he was 1 year old in the French-Algerian War. But he's best known, for me, among the French existentialists as the most handsome. They say he looks like James Dean. So I'm not sure what the other ones look like, but he does come up. But he looks cool. I mean, if all philosophers look like this, my classes would have been fuller at Moody, but not quite. But his father did pass away when he was a year old. And there's certain personalities where meaning is so important that if you can't find meaning, you can't motivate yourself. I think some of you are like that. I'm like that. My wife used to say, if you didn't know Jesus, you would have committed suicide decades ago. Probably right. I need a larger purpose for whatever I do. And so Camus has this writing, and this is done around late high school. I haven't got anything anymore. I don't believe in God. He's rejected religion. And it's impossible to live like this. Having killed morality inside me, I have no more purpose, no more reason to live, and I will die. But before he carried that out, he decided to go to college, University of Algiers, and study philosophy, in particular meaning. And his special area of contribution in existential philosophy is the absurd. So when you say the absurd in that context, you automatically think of Camus. So human creatures who spent their lives trying to convince themselves that their existence is not absurd. Now, what does he mean by the absurd? Well, there are 2 parts here. On the first part, the universe has evolved us as creatures who can't help but ask the question, what is the meaning of life? And yet the universe doesn't offer an answer. That's the absurd. So that, the left side, that's Will Durant. Remember the meaning of life? The guy that came and asked while he was raking his leaves in the 1920s or so. And then he asked all these celebrities and scholars, and then he wrote it in a book. On the right, 50 years later, Life magazine did the same thing without knowing what Will Durant did. Until the book went into publication, they did not know. But they did the same thing. 50 years. And they're still asking the same question, what is the meaning of life? For Life magazine, they put it together in this particular book. And the question of me followed up by other magazines, Esquire, what is the meaning of life? So we're constantly trying to find and answer this question because we are the types of beings who can't help but ask that question. And what the universe does is it doesn't provide an answer. There is no answer. What is the meaning of life? In other words, there is no the answer, the singular answer. Or perhaps more accurately, there are so many different answers. So I used to have this saying at Moody, when students ask me theological questions, I would say, I don't have the truth, but I have a lot of answers. Pick which one you want. Because there are answers, it's just that we don't have the answer. So that when you look at the Life magazine book, you have all of these individuals that were written to, Steve Jobs, Kubrick, Wallace, Ray Bradbury, and they have all of these, and you have the responses that are given, and while there's some degree of overlap, they're vastly different. So that if you have J. Stephen Gould, and is an evolutionary biologist at Harvard, and look what he says on the third one. We are here, third paragraph, because one odd group of fishes had a particular fin anatomy that could transform into legs for terrestrial creatures because the earth never froze entirely during an ice age and so on. So there is no objective answer to the meaning of life. This is Bukowski. I like his answer. I don't know if he got out of the college fraternity mindset, but we are here to learn the teachings of the church, state, and our educational system. We're here to drink beer. We're here to kill war. We are here to laugh at the odds and live our lives so well that death will tremble to take us. Now, that's very eloquent. I just don't know what that means, but it's very eloquent. And then my favorite one, why? Just here. There is no answer. You are just present. But no discussion on the meaning of life can ever be found without this book. I've never read this, but have you guys, there's a movie made and it just seems like the Life of Brian type of movie or book. So I never, read this thing. But I'm told the storyline is that the Earth had killed each other off, and there are two guys that were left, and they're traveling through space, and they come across this supercomputer, and they type in this question: what is the answer to the ultimate question of life? Computer takes all of this time and calculates everything, and then finally, do you remember the answer? 47. Wow, you guys are nerdier than I thought. I fit. I belong finally. 42 is the answer to that particular question. Now, if you look at the answer, you think, wow, it's absurd, it's stupid. And that's part of Camus' point, is that you ask this question, and yet there are no real objective, meaningful answers. So he goes on, he writes, this is his famous book, The Myth of Sisyphus. And in this book, that's the Greek hero who escapes death or cheats death twice. And the gods, the gods don't die, human beings do. And so he's punished eternally, where he pushes up that boulder up the hill. And then when he falls asleep, the boulder comes down. And the next morning, he pushes it back up. Falls down, pushes back up. This may sound a little bit like your day. The alarm clock rings and you shower, brush teeth, you go to work over and over again. It's sort of like Groundhog's Day, right? Over and over, the same thing. Have you ever watched this movie? And this is very well done. There's a scene where he saves this homeless guy. Homeless guy's freezing to death and he's dying. And he takes him and gives him soup at a restaurant, right? And then the next day, it's the same guy, same situation, same freezing. He takes him to the restaurant, and feeds him. It's just over and over again. And you wonder, is there meaning to what he's doing? And this is the question that Camus is asking. He says, the first thing you can try is religion. And he admits that religion provides the answer. And they're clean answers. But there's no reason to believe in religion itself. There's no evidence. I'm not sure he's that wrong. Because when I'm driving from Chicago to Maryland back and forth, you ever see this sign? Right, there is evidence for God. Every time I see this sign, I get so cynical because I want to put up a picture of a baby miscarriage. He is evidence for God. What about the flip side? What about this baby? Born deformed, still alive. Is he evidence for God or evidence for the non-existence of God? Can I say this? For every evidence of God you put out, there is a reason why not to accept that evidence. So the second one is suicide. And so Albert Camus spent a good bit of time reflecting on suicide. And he argues the main question within philosophy is why you shouldn't commit suicide. Because he says, no, every philosophical issue you talk about, no one thinks about, oh, I'm going to kill myself if I don't find an answer to that. Except for the question of meaning. That's the only question where if you don't find a meaningful answer, people commit suicide. So should you commit suicide or not? And Camus argues, no, if you do, you're giving into the absurdity of the universe. Then how do you live? He says, you create your own meaning, reframe your mindset so that what you do, you give it purpose. There's no such thing as calling. You find purpose for yourself in what you do. The meaning of life is to give life a meaning. That summarizes decently what he's trying to argue. So that when you get to Sisyphus, he says, look, Sisyphus is trapped in this, everyday same back and forth. The meaning is not why he is doing this. The meaning is how he is doing this. That he's not fated by Zeus to do this. Instead, every morning he says, I am going to do it. I choose to do it. And I will do it to the best of my ability with all the power within me. It's how, not why. I was going to teach you to overcome despair by transforming thus it was into thus I was. Now, that's a Nietzschean quote, one of my favorites from Nietzsche, that you don't have to, you get to. No matter what, you don't have to, you get to. You get to wake up in the morning. Turn off the alarm clock. Brush your teeth for the umpteenth time. Eat breakfast, go to work, work on the codes or tax forms or whatever. You get to. And you will do it with all the gusto because you find it meaningful, not because you were called to do it. It's sort of like the football game, Cumberland against Georgia Tech. 222-0. I think he covered the point spread on this. I find that Cumberland rushing on minus 42. They didn't even gain a yard. And 2 for 18 passing, 15 turnovers. And then for Georgia Tech, 978 yards, 32. At some point you would think compassion would kick in and say that's not. But Camus would say, you're behind 222 points. It's the fourth quarter. It's a still meaningful game, even though you're not going to win, because how you play the game is more important than whether you win or not. Go and give it everything that you got. This would be somewhat like John Wooden, right? The UCLA coach, 10 basketball championships. It isn't what you do, but how you do it. And so Camus writes the struggle itself toward the height is the struggle itself is enough to fill a man's heart. One must imagine that he is satisfied with his life. Because he finds a meaningful. You may not, but it's not your life. It's not your life. This is sort of like the children's book, Little Prince, right? It's a profound book. It's kind of one of the most profound books in children's literature. It's actually written for everyone. The Little Prince is on his own little planet, and he has a garden, and he takes care of it and weeds it. And one day a rose pops up. He thought, oh, it's the most beautiful thing ever. And he falls in love with the rose and takes care of the rose and waters it, does all these things. But the rose turns out to be pretty demanding. Not the easiest rose to live with. And so the Little Prince thought, you know what? I need a vacation. So he goes off into the universe flying around, and he comes and lands on Earth, and he finds this rose garden. And he thinks, wow, I thought my rose was so special. It's just one among thousands and millions. And he loses heart that the uniqueness of his rose has been shattered. And then this fox comes in, and words of wisdom, he says, your rose is just like all other roses except for one thing. Its relationship to you. You love the rose. You invested your time in the rows. You care about those. In fact, even now, you can't help but think about your rows. That's what makes the row special. It's meaningful because you find it meaningful. See, this is sort of like what Camus is arguing, that your daily activity, that you find it meaningful, you give it value. So that if you ask a guy, and this is a very common illustration, you ask a guy, what are you doing? I'm laying bricks. See, that's on a level of activity. He's laying bricks. That's all he's doing, and he's earning a paycheck. Or he can say, I'm constructing a building. A little bit more meaningful, right? He's making a building. Or I am building a house for God. It's the same activity, but if you're building it as a house for God, if you find it meaningful, building a building, then that work provides meaning for you because of your relationship to it. It's sort of like the story that's told by John F. Kennedy, when you had a race to the moon, put the man on the moon, and he goes down to NASA, and the story is that he found this janitor, and he was cleaning up, and he asked the janitor, what are you doing? And the janitor responded, I'm helping put a man on the moon. Can you imagine the way he cleans? That will be fundamentally different because his activity has been reframed by a larger purpose. Zookeepers, they're probably the most educated but least paid. I think so. 80% college degree. I just looked that up. ZipRecruiter, Annandale, Virginia, 18 to 32,000. You could probably make more these days at McDonald's with a college degree, but most zookeepers do not go into that profession for the money. They do it because it's a calling. They're in love with animals. A lot of it is ecological preservation. So that those who are zookeepers, because they do it meaningful, because it's a larger purpose, they work more unpaid hours. In other words, they volunteered and they were far more effort into what they did because it's reframed as a sense of purpose. I have a friend, I haven't seen him in a while. His name is Paul, and I met him at the first church I served in Chicago, and he was a stock trader. He did corn's, what is it?
Futures.
Yes, thank you. The corn features was his specialty. And one day he said, you want to go see the stock exchange in the city of Chicago? And I went down there, and this is not far off. It is the weirdest thing. There's like maybe 100, 150 guys standing in the middle, and they're all like talking, everyone at once. And then, some guys, and they go point like this, and, it looks like it's pointing to 50 guys, but they can communicate, write down their thing, and then they buy and they sell. But if you ask Paul, what do you do? He doesn't say he buys corn. He says he's a venture capitalist for the kingdom of God. He wants to make as much money as possible so that he can fund Christian organizations. It was a time when my wife and I were struggling financially and we couldn't pay tuition. And he wrote out right to the school, paid it off for that one semester because that's his calling. He makes money so that he might push forward the kingdom agenda. And so the answer in of itself is not completely satisfying. And we'll come back next to that. But Camus has a point. It is the way you frame will determine quite a bit how much meaning that you draw out from your activity, your career, your relationship, your ministry here. The second and the last point, meaning can instill passion into what you do. And it's sort of linked to the first point, but it instills passion into what we do. And don't you just love people who do things with passion in their hearts? There's a phenomenon called quiet quitting. Most of you are aware, or you've seen that in the industry. Quiet quitting, you had the Great Resignation, and now you have people who are quiet quitting, especially during COVID and afterwards. And quiet quitting isn't where you're not doing your job. You're doing your job, but you're doing it enough to satisfy the job description, but not in terms of excellence. So you don't stay after work and keep working. When it's 5 o'clock, you go out. However you go out. Because your work is not your life, and you're not working for promotion. You simply put in hours, do the job description, and that's it. You don't go above and beyond. I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but what I am saying is that if you're involved in quitting, it's probably safe to say you're not passionate about your work. In fact, quiet quitting seems to be a fun. In China, it's called lying down. So that's a phenomena there as well. But the blue line, so the green line is quiet quitting. The blue line is actively disengaged, so that you have a good percentage of people at work, your coworkers perhaps, who are not giving their 100% full on. Maybe you even know some of them who are there just to put in the time, get the paycheck. But there isn't passion in their work.
But they're not necessarily quiet.
Go. I love that. Yes. Oh, actually, everybody, there is a new category called loud quitting. Not just quiet quitting. Yes, you're right. This would be quiet quitting is the opposite of Twitter and Elon Musk, hardcore El Camino. Maybe you've seen that one, where he's laying off people. He sent out this company-wide emails or Twitter message saying, look, if you don't really want to be here, quit. But if you stay, you're going to work. You're going to work extra hours. You're going to work above and beyond. And he
said you have to work in the office.
Oh, yeah. You mean like this?
Yeah.
Yes.
It's like no telework.
Yeah, you have to come in and you're and I heard a certain percentage of the people quit, but others stayed. I can tell you, if you stay and do hardcore, it's because you have some passion for what Twitter is or can become. Or you have no choice, perhaps, with all the tech layoff these days, a level of desperation. Although if you don't have choice, I bet you years open for other openings along the side to make a shift. But to be fully invested, that you have some degree of purpose. So that if you want to solve quiet quitting, see, the managers need to create accountability for individual performance and all of that. But look at the bottom line. Most importantly, every organization needs a culture in which people are engaged and feel that they belong. And then right here, employees must see how they work in the organization's larger purpose. You have to give a purpose framework. And these days, companies are trying to write their vision statements in terms of a larger purpose statement rather than in terms of their product or profit for the stockholders. Here's a guy, a Japanese guy living in Mexico City Airport. Hiroshi Nohara has been there for almost 3 months. No one really seems to know why, and neither does he. So that, yes, they won, and then he's become actually like a celebrity, so that people would go and take pictures of him. But he's just sitting there for 3 months. He lives off of donations. He actually has a ticket to return back to Japan, but he doesn't. It's not that he doesn't want to go back. It's just that he doesn't care. So he just lives in the airport for 3 months. And then remember the movie with Tom Hanks, the guy? Yeah, Tom Hanks, he was stuck there. But Nirosha, he's not stuck there. In fact, he has a visa that allows him to go into Mexico, but he's just staying at the airport. And he reportedly has a ticket to go back home. He's just there. Because I'm assuming that he has no passion for anything. The flip side of it is Angela Duckworth. Angela Duckworth, I really like her writing. She's phenomenal, and she's huge these days. But she grew up, and her father, I think she was a child of 3, and her father kept telling her, you know genius. You know. So when you say Angela Duckworth, it's like, wow, that's a terrible way to raise a child. It's an American family. And then you realize she's Chinese. Her family is Chinese, and she's an immigrant family. And the father kept telling her, you're no genius along the way. And Duckworth writes in her book, the irony is that she won the MacArthur Award. You know, the MacArthur Award is called the Genius Award, MacArthur Foundation. So that she says the irony of it is that I am a genius on one level. And when she told her father just smiled, you know. her TED Talk, and it's, I think, about 15 minutes long. And if you have time, you should watch it. Oh, the clarity. And she went through, I forgot how many versions of her talk, because it came off too technical, and then she had to rewrite it. Came off too technical, and she wrote it, rewrote and rewrote, and then she memorized it until it came off unmemorized. It's an amazing presentation. 11 million views in 9 years. And this is what she says. She says, look, grit is sticking with your future day in and day out, not just for the week, not just for the month, but for years, and working really hard to make that future a reality. And then she says, let me tell you something. I'm going to grow up to love my work as much as you love yours. I won't just have a job. I'll have a calling. I'll challenge myself every day. When I get knocked down, I'll get back up. I may not be the smartest person in the world, but I'll strive to be the grittiest. I would, if my kids don't have this, of all the things I could wish for my kids, that would be it. You know, Japanese have a saying, fall 7, get up 8. As long as getting up is higher than falling down, you would have been a success. And so West Point Academy commissioned her to do a study on the cadets because, you know, I heard, I don't know, something like 11,000 applicants, and they bring in 1,000 some, and then always in that first a week or month, it's sort of like how week, and I don't know, 10 to 15%, some proportion of them quit. And they're trying to find out, they quit. What is it? And it's not the grades, it's not their extracurricular activities, it's not their leadership ability. They're trying to find, what is it? And so they brought it to do the study. And what they found was that it's grit. They not only had determination, they had direction. They knew in a very, very deep way what it was they wanted. What do you want out of your life? Second to the last illustration. This is Jean-Dominique Bowlby. He has a locked-in syndrome. Locked-in syndrome, he's absolutely paralyzed, but his mind has worked perfectly well. I can't imagine a worse state to be in. At least in Alzheimer's, you don't know. You lose. But here, you're absolutely paralyzed, but you cannot. Your mind is still 100%, so that he's bedridden. And what happened one day was that when he was 43, no way of communicating, his friend Bernard saw him twitching his left eye and realized that he had control of his ability to blink his left eye so that you could ask him yes or no questions. And he would blink in such a way to respond. And Jean thought, you know, I'm going to write a book. So what they did was they developed an alphabet. So, yeah, you know, most common in English, E. So you would start with the most common E and then work your way down. And as soon as it was the letter that he wanted, he would give the blink 200,000 times to write that book. A book that has gone on to critical acclaim, a movie that is made. Because for the first time, you can hear the thoughts of someone who's absolutely paralyzed, but a completely active mind. That's his purpose. My last story is Martin Luther King. Familiar story for most of us. It's become a cultural hero. But for him, one of the defining moments was when he was riding a train and there's segregation in the train cars. And in order to shield them from the whites, they put a curtain so that they would have to stand behind the curtain. And he says when the curtain came, he felt invisible, right? He has this saying, I'm not a nobody, I'm a somebody. And so he got involved, but originally he was the pastor in Atlanta. And as a pastor, they had called him because of the Montgomery, after Rosa Parks, they were doing the Montgomery bus boycott. And so they called him to get involved. And so they did the boycott. And as they were doing the boycott, there was a tremendous amount of pressure for the boycott to be broken. And the leaders were being threatened. So they're getting these calls and things for them to stop. He said, one of the defining moments, Lord, I'm here trying to do what's right, but Lord, I must confess I'm weak, I'm faulting, I'm losing my courage. Then he says, I heard a voice from heaven, Martin Luther, stand up for righteousness, stand up for justice, stand up for truth, and I'll be with you even to the end of the world. I think it was at this moment he was more of a crusader than a pastor, because he was struggling between the responsibilities of the church and the civil rights movement. And then one of the days that he was speaking at a church nearby, they had come and thrown a bomb in front of his house that had exploded. And thank God his wife and daughter and I think a family friend were in the back of the house, so they were not injured. And when this news went out, the African-American community had converged and they were to do violence. And actually the white authorities had called Martin to get him down here so that he could calm the crowd down. And he faced this existential crisis. There's one thing, there's one thing for you to be threatened, but your family and daughter to be threatened is another thing. And it's the 1 year anniversary after that bombing. So I went to bed many nights scared to death, but then early on a sleepless morning in January 56, rationality left me almost out of nowhere, right? Preach the gospel. So I'm not afraid of anybody this morning. Tell Montgomery they can keep shooting, I'm going to stand up to them. Tell Montgomery they can keep bombing, and I'm going to stand up to them. If I had to die tomorrow morning, I will die happy because I've been to the mountaintop and I've seen the promised land, and it's going to be here in Montgomery. He has this saying, look, if you're afraid for your wife and kids, they'll control you. That fear will control you. And so he was willing to sacrifice his family in order to, and as we know from this particular hotel in Memphis, that he lost his life as well because he had passion. I'm not sure there's anyone who can stir your heart from the pulpit as much as he. Just Google one of his sermons. Just listen to him. It's amazing. And I just end with the Apostle Paul. I mean, Apostle Paul, this is his resume to the church in Corinth to justify his ministry. And it's not where he graduated from or what churches he founded. It's, 5 times beaten at the hands, beaten with rods, whipped, stoned, shipwrecked, danger from rivers, robbers, my own people, from Gentiles, danger in the city, in the wilderness, danger at sea, danger from false brothers, in toil and hardship. Through many a sleepless night in hunger and thirst, often without food, in cold and exposure. I don't have to imagine him being happy. I know he is happy because he's found passion. Because passion is not about happiness. Passion is about fulfilling your calling in such a way that at the end of your life, you can look back and give a sigh of relief that you have done what you were called to do. So today I've asked one of our members, Safara, because I was talking to her a couple of weeks ago, and she was sharing with me a vision that she had. And I thought, wow, this is great. It would be great to share. So I don't want to say any more than that. And so I'll hand over the floor for maybe about 10 minutes or so. This is Safara, everyone, in case you didn't know.
Good morning, everyone. I'm sorry I speak French. I also come in English, so you can take time to hear what I'm saying. Can you hear my voice?
Yes.
Because I'm in the prayer season right now. That's why my voice is coming. So, last year I shared some message with Pastor David. I gave my life to Jesus since 1997. Nobody pushed me across the nothing. Jesus revealed himself to me, so I saw him. And then he said, love me, he's the way to keep me alive. So that's the way I was. I looked for the church. From the Catholic, I moved to the gospel things and everything. So I called a friend of mine. Every time she invited me to her church, and every time I said tomorrow. And then when I called her, I said, I'm coming to visit you. She said, when you said that, I said, I'm coming to visit you. And then it was funny because I used to go to nightclub. So the way I was dressing, my story was like and then, so I went that Sunday, and then I'm not used to know when the pastor prayed people fall on the floor, and then I was scared. I said, maybe he was bizarre. And then it was a pastor from Congo ago, he was preaching the term of God time. And then that touched me. And then after the service, I went to see the pastor. I said, I want to give my life to Jesus. He looked at me, but the way I was dressed, he looked at me and said, but here is not the nightclub. This. So I said yes. 3 times I said yes. And then I gave my life. I was baptized, and then God was using me because I don't know. Sometimes people give a prophetic something he talk to me in a vision or some kind of thing. So people think a lot of message. And then something happened, and then I stopped going to church. It's where God was talking to me. Jesus was talking to me and everything. So from that, I went to prophetic ministry. And then from that, I went to the deliverance ministry where they did a lot of healing, pray for sick people and everything. This is where I really worked very hard on that department. And then God asked me to stay home. So when I stay home, this is where I started working in me. He gave me a lot of message and everything. I said, okay, God, now show me the church where you want me to go. So that's my ministry with God. And then when Pastor David sent me emails and I'm here to share some word about my experience and everything, I said, God, okay, I don't want to go there and say about me. I don't want to glorify myself. I want to glorify you. And when I'm talking to my brother and sister, if it's someone going through difficulty like a marriage, financial, with the children, whatever, everything I've said, I want them to be healed. I don't want them to live here without getting some message. And then he said, okay, talk about David. I said, talking about David? He said, yeah, the suffering of David. So I said, okay, because I never heard it, but I know that we know all about the story of David, how he killed, how he slept, whatever. And then if someone has a Bible, can read 2 Samuel 12, 10 to 12. 2 Samuel 12 to 10. If someone has any read aloud, 2 Samuel 12, 10 to 12. And read that. Can someone read that?
Okay. Now therefore the sword will never depart from your house, because you despised me, and took the wife of Uriah the Hittite to be your own. This is what the Lord says. Out of your own household I am going to bring calamity on you. Before your very eyes I will take your wives and give them to the one who is close to you, and he will sleep with your wives in broad daylight. You did it in secret, but I will do this thing in broad daylight before all Israel.
Okay, this passage is about, we know about what David did, everything, but the reason I want you to read this one, don't take it somewhere. Okay, one of the sons of David slept with his sister. David didn't say anything because he went back to what God told David. But his son didn't understand why his father can see something like this without saying anything. But he didn't know that David was suffering inside of him because he knew what God told him. And then the other brother was trying to revenge from his sister Tamar. So what he did, he went to kill his own brother. David has a second pain again. Sorry. He couldn't say anything. But the son didn't know that in the bed, when David sleeping, is quiet. Because no, he's lost 2 children, Tamar and then Amnon. The both that the daddy was suffering, but nobody knows how he was suffering. So besides that, one of his sons slept with one of his wife. That was another pain. David went through that. But he doesn't stop David to serve God. Nobody said that David stopped serving God. He was serving God, do what God asked him to do. But inside of him, he was suffering, crying. He couldn't share that to anyone. Because when God was talking to him on that message, nobody was there. It was between him and God. So he was suffering. So when God said that to them, and then he said, okay, I'm going to tell you my story about my son. I don't know if you guys met my son. I went through a lot. God put me a different way to see if I can be someone that he can use. So every time that the testing comes, I remember that the revelation that he gave me, that he went to use me. So that helped me to stand on my feet. One day it's a lot of things, but I'm going to put that like a short story. So I was at home cooking African food and everything. And then I was about to eat, and my daughter called me. She said, Mom, your son was arrested. I said, for what? And then I didn't panic, nothing. I said, for what? Oh, he was driving. I said, since when he started driving? Because I didn't put him in the driving school. So I was like, so he was speeding, he used the weed and marijuana and everything. I was like, she's talking about my son or she's talking about who? I mean, I was like, I said, you know what, that's not my problem. And I was cooking, I said, that's not my problem. He's learned his mistake and everything. She said, yeah, Daddy said the same thing, everything. But that one didn't do anything to me. Until we hang up, I said, thank you for letting me know. And then the reason I received that call is because they're trying to hide that from me. And then the judge refused for the father to bail him out. So now they have to tell the mother. It's what I get in the news. Otherwise, if the judge let him pay, do the bail, whatever, I won't know anything. But I know the God that I serve. He said that won't happen. She has to know what's going on with her son. So I said, okay. So I hung up the phone. Believe or not, I sat down to eat, but the food couldn't get in my cup. As a mother, I presently I went in my bed and I started crying. And then I pray, I remind God, I said, you told me that this son I had it by grace. So you didn't give me that son to stay in that jail. It's not his place there. You have to take him out. So that what I did, I was remind God what he told me. So look at me, I didn't know what. So only option that I had, bend my knee in front of God and pray. So what happened? It was the moment for the few minutes I stopped. I said, "Why am I crying?" So what if they called me and they said that my son died on the street because he was driving without driver's license, without nothing? So what about if they said that he killed someone? So what about they said that it is like every time what I did, I stopped crying and I started worshiping God. Thank him for everything he done for my son, for saving him from whatever you can call it. So I said, I was like, thank him, worship him, praise him to save my son's life. And then the rest of people who was with my son, and then people who didn't kill everything. I said, oh, maybe they can say, okay, maybe the police stopped him and said, okay, get off in the car. And he was like, they funny thing, and they said, oh, the police killed him. So everything, when I saw all the pictures, what I did, praise him. So the day the judge gave us to us, I received a call saying that the judge changed the date. I said, okay, now is the time to get in the warfare. So now I call people back home, like the pastor and everything, to get up and start praying. Now we're getting the warfare.